Eric and Mark, the Playground Rules experts. Welcome to our show.
Welcome to the Eric and Mark Show. The setup is simple. One table, 3 chairs, inviting you to be a part of this conversation. You know, something that has been of great fascination to me are the amazing similarities between what happens in the office place, what happens in relationships, what happens in schools, what happens on sports teams, as compared to the dynamics you may see on the playground. You see, Mark, there isn't a person in this room or listening to this show that does not want to be successful. And one of the critical components of success is understanding the rules that confine you. You see, Mark, I don't know about you, but I don't remember ever receiving a playground rule manual when I was in school that would teach me how to be successful in that format, unless I was a popular kid. And the interesting thing is that the rules that one learns in the playground instill a method in everybody on how they will treat each other in the future. For those of us still having a hard time to buying into the comparison between the playground rules and antics phenomenon in the real world setting, let's take a look at the executive of the playground. The executive of the playground is the cool kid. Loud, boisterous, pushy, opinionated, and one that will isolate all those and bully all those who refuse to bow down to their antics. And I contend that because in that social structure are rewarded with cool kid titleship, those young individuals carry on those practices into the place of business and into all of their human relationships. And conversely, those not avid enough to obtain the cool kid titleship are forced to struggle for scraps, and they carry that mentality into the workforce and relationships in their older age. And in my experience, Mark, unless these kids have had the benefit and the blessing of having a coach or a teacher to help debunk that muse, they will continue those antics and become workplace and relationship bullies. So, Mark, I'm interested in what your experience has been, both in the playground and on the workforce.
All right, Eric. So, yeah, that's a really good question. You're always really good about putting those things out there that make us all think. And I think back to my earlier days, childhood days, and I definitely, I'm not ashamed to say that I definitely experienced my fair share of bullying. There was physical bullying, verbal taunting, that type of thing. And then once I got into the workforce, professional workforce, that kind of thing, went to college, that kind of thing, it was like I wasn't bullied in the same way because the playground was now more of a metaphor as opposed to reality, and or as opposed to a live situation. Let's say it was still reality as a phenomenon, as you've spoken about, and I've seen a decent amount of restraint within people, professional restraint. I think people are competitive. They're trying to one-up each other and that kind of thing. At the same time, however, I will say I do remember a few incidents, including one with the manager, where it just seemed like, yeah, he was the executive, and even though he may have not been an executive by title, he was a supervisor, I guess was his official title. He seemed to just be able to speak with me however he pleased. You know what I'm saying? And I actually went ahead and I went as far as to report him for harassment. And I don't know, human resources went ahead and made some kind of seemingly feeble or mock attempt at mediating the situation between us. But again, I wasn't trying to complain about him or get him into trouble. I was trying to go ahead and make the work environment better for myself. But it just seemed like this guy, just a really very well-rounded individual, very knowledgeable in the subject matter. I don't think that they had anybody who was actually more well-rounded in the subject matter, not that I knew of anyway. So it's kind of like, hey, you know what? I'm the guy who knows knows the subject matter the best. So I'm not necessarily a very good manager, but I get to be the a-hole. And it was a very unpleasant experience for me. Like, again, I felt like nobody on my team was going to help me. HR, like I said, didn't really seem to do much because it wasn't really harassment or anything in the classic sense. It was just more kind of it was more I would say I was being challenged, maybe in a disrespectful way. And yeah, I just felt like I had little to no recourse at that time. So that was extremely unpleasant. At the same time, that's kind of like back to your point about the executive. That's the guy. This guy, again, was not an executive by title, but he was definitely the executive because he seemed to have the popularity and everyone's trust, and a certain degree of that was earned because he's a very intelligent guy. But at the same time, I didn't give him the right to talk down to people the way that he did, and he just seemed to be able to get away with that.
So it's kind of interesting how on the playground, like a similar dynamic where the bully seems to know how to ride that line. And, you can try and tell a teacher, but they're going to just blow you off as a complainer, or, there really is no mechanism on the playground or on the workforce to really adequately help employees that feel like they're being treated subserviently to be able to find corrective action for that, is what it sounds like you were saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I was in school and I was being bullied, it just, you heard a lot of things like, he's giving you a hard time, just ignore him or we'll talk to him or that kind of thing. And then it would come back to maybe they'd be suppressed for a little while, or they'd exercise some self-restraint, but that was back to the same thing. If we're speaking about two spheres here, what people experienced in school, in their personal life versus what they've experienced in professional environments. I know we're going to talk about adult personal relationships here as well, or personal relationships between adults at some point. But I would definitely say I don't feel like going to school like nearly enough was being done about preventing people from being bullied. I felt like I was going to get ridiculed, whether I was tried to be quiet or tried to avert the situation, or whether I went ahead and told somebody. I even felt like to a degree like, it was difficult to bring it up to my own parents. That was as far as the school situation. In the work situation, I felt stronger. I felt more confident, but at the same time, I felt like my options were limited. I'm like, okay, here I'm an adult, and I'm not going to take anybody's quote-unquote BS. But at the same time, what can I really do? It's nice to feel tough and strong and confident and everything, but there have got to be some options. That's why I was really hoping that, within our show today, we're going to go ahead and talk about what are some of the possibilities. What can people do when leadership is abusive in those roles, whether it's in the playground in professional settings, or that leadership is self-imposed, or even the case that I was speaking of where the guy actually had some real credentials, but he used those credentials in a lot of cases rather than to empower and to educate. He used those to make somebody feel bad or intimidated, or like, oh hey, I better make sure that he's happy with my performance, otherwise I'm going to get canned. I mean, nobody wants to go to work every day and to want to think that way, that they're always on the brink of being either let go or talked down to or whatever. And this is and then people will speak about trial periods, probationary periods. I'd already gotten through my probationary period. He was not pleasant during my probationary period, which is about, I believe, 90 days, and then I once I was offered the job, so obviously I did an adequate job or decent job enough to get as a contract for hire, and I got offered a permanent position. he continued, and actually he became even worse. It just seemed like he had that sort of sense of security, like, oh, so Mark is here now, so now it's kind of like a done deal. He's a permanent employee here now, so now they've got a definitive advantage. So it was just a really strange situation, and I've got some other thoughts and commentary on it, but I'll let you take over here for a moment, because I think it's really important that people understand this concept and this phenomenon well, and people can feel free to reach out to us via email, or drop some comments, suggestions, and I think this is a really important topic.
Definitely. So bullying is a big issue, and it is definitely not systemically addressed enough, or at least effectively. As you said, this show is going to be about helping people that may be in this predicament find actionable items, find ways that they can go about trying to make it better for themselves. Something I've kind of felt in the school sector, schools have an issue with admitting that bullying exists, from the perspective that I surmise is that there is liability involved for them by accepting that it exists. So do you think it is the liability of accepting it exists the reason why at schools they try and brush it off as you're being too sensitive, or just ignore it? And in the adult realm, do you think that they don't realize that bullying can happen between adults, that they just assume it's a child's issue and therefore blow it off as, you're just being too sensitive?
Well, yeah, as far as both those questions, I think that in the educational realm, I think that people are sensitive to it. People are aware of it now more than ever, because we have the internet, and there's those phenomenons of, there's more different types of bullying now for kids going to school than ever before. And what ends up happening is, I think that there is a raised awareness about that, which I think is a good thing. However, I think that there's also part of it that people have just come to accept in culture. I don't know if it's just American culture around the world, where it's like, oh, hey, you're going through school, and it's going to happen to you at some point. Now everybody's going to like everybody, and somebody's going to give you a hard time. It's like, not to say that they trivialize it, but I think that there's just some level of it that it seems like almost like people are thought like, it's okay. Like, hey, it's going to happen. Everybody's going to experience it to different degrees, and whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Some other people sometimes I think could just come across as really sensitive. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not being judgmental of that, but it's like, oh, you go ahead and you say something with a tone they don't like, or you look at them the wrong way, and immediately they're already like ready with a trigger to say, oh, they're being harassed or mistreated or whatever. It seems like sometimes that happens to people also, where they're just like very, very sensitive. And again, that's not saying anything bad about their character, but it's like sometimes maybe somebody feels, I'm not just talking about my own personal experience, other people I know, you have to almost walk on eggshells in order to make them feel like they're not being harassed or disrespected or bullied. So I think it's kind of important to split the difference. As far as the professional environments, the adult environments, I think that they just use different words. I think that they're aware that it exists, but what we would consider to be bullying in school, they probably refer to as harassment, and have it, in every thick human resources manual about all the different types of harassment and that type of thing. And, those types of harassment, I take them seriously. They're real. And I believe that, at least one of them has happened to me. I've been a victim of that myself, in professional environment, including the aforementioned situation I spoke about. But at the same time, yeah, I think that there's definitely an awareness that type of thing happens. But because, like I mentioned, people are more restrained, sometimes it's in the subtleties. Case in point, this manager that I'm speaking of, the supervisor, he went ahead and say, you know what, I think I need to be tough on you because you're a really intelligent guy and I see a lot of potential in you, and it just seems like you kind of get a little bit too complacent, so you need somebody who's going to go ahead and be tough on you and challenge you. Now, in a normal situation, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with somebody saying, hey, I'm going to challenge you, I'm going to be a little bit tough on you because I feel that's going to get the best out of you. I'm okay with that on some level. But then at some point you're just like, well, how much is too much? How much does it become to the point that you don't enjoy coming to work anymore? Or you feel uncomfortable and that kind of thing, or you feel like somebody's triggering negative feelings from you and you don't know how to respond. So I felt if he had done a good job to split the difference, that it would have been a better experience. However, I feel like he did go overboard. Not everybody has their own threshold, and I respect that. What's okay for me may not be okay for others, and vice versa. But in this case, I think that it kind of gives us I need to challenge you to make you better. It kind of gives people the go ahead to think that it's okay to go too far. They can push the envelope as far as they see fit to try to get quote unquote the best out of you, and it just seems like it's a lame excuse for bullying, which is we can code as in a professional environment as harassment.
In this manager's alleged attempts to make you stronger, was he demeaning, or was she demeaning to you, or what made it feel like bullying and reminiscent of those days in the playground?
That's an excellent question, and it was pretty much the message was, I need to challenge you to get the best out of you. And one time, I believe that the manager said, even I think we were talking on the cell phone. I think we were both already, it might have been outside of work after hours. He asked me if I was he asked me, "Are you a complete idiot? Like, how could you do that? ... I was like, he doesn't have a right to talk to me that way. But he was on his cell phone, and I was on my cell phone, and we were outside of the work environment. We were on the phone, and I think that he probably just thought he could go ahead and get away with it, maybe because it was after work hours, because we were on the mobile phones. I don't know what it was. But then, during our meetings with other team members, he went ahead and called me out several times, saying that things that had worked for other people, techniques to go ahead and achieve the goals of the team, had not worked with me. And the way that he said it, sometimes the tone is like, "Yeah, we already tried that with you, Mark, and that didn't go so well now, did it?" And how do you report that? Because in the case of the idiot, he's actually calling me a name. But in the case of the meeting, he never called me a name or whatever. It was his tone. Like, yeah, we've already tried that with you. That's not good enough. Now, if somebody says that to you, to everyone who's listening out there, it says, yeah, we already tried to do this and this for you, and that didn't go so well now, didn't it? So now we're going ahead, and I guess we're going to have to go ahead and shift to plan B. That sounds like almost like a statement that's dripping with sarcasm to me. So, I don't know. It was stuff like that that he seemed to come at me with. And I just felt like I was being disrespected. Sometimes it was in the subtleties, in the tone, and sometimes it was just outright. I think there was only the one time worth outright name calling, and like I said, that was on the mobile phone after work hours.
So something the bullies do on the playground is they assert their authority by whatever means necessary. And at the end of the day, it seems like a self-serving move to make themselves feel bigger than you are, or to kind of put you in your place. And what that says to me is that the real corporate executive never took the time to establish parameters of how this person was to exercise his leadership, and how this person was to exercise change if he felt change is needed. Did you get that sense, like he was kind of going from the cuff of what he believes works for him, or what has worked for him in the past?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very good point right there, because it seems to me, and again, and let's tell like it is. I don't want to speak for everybody here. I can't speak for everybody, but I think there's a degree of, as we enter our adult lives, there's and maybe even younger, we have a degree of cynicism or skepticism and that kind of thing. I think when it comes to most companies, it's just a matter of, hey, if you go ahead and they tell you basically, if you go ahead and you make the company money, but you don't break any rules outright, that are, covered in the HR manual or whatever, then they're going to go ahead and keep you. So if the guy is making the money, obviously, well, he's a subject matter expert, so I assume that he was directly or indirectly making them money, or he was a valuable asset to them. And then I would think that, like I said, the statement of idiot, or calling me an idiot, was, again, after work hours. I don't know how that factors into what's in the manual, but at the same time, if he's going ahead and he's saying something like what he said, like, well, we tried such and such, but obviously it didn't go with you, but obviously that didn't go so well, so on to plan B. That's a gray area. That's a statement that sounds condescending or disrespectful or sarcastic, like I said. But is that really covered in any HR manual? Is that actually breaking a rule? I'm not so sure that it is. And what do? You go into the HR and you go ahead and say, hey, I felt like his tone was disrespectful. His tone was very condescending. It's like, okay, well, we'll talk to him about it and get his side of it, and we'll let you know what he says. And, we'll give him a general reminder, hey, make sure you're being respectful when you talk to employees. But at the end of the day, they're not going to fire him over something like that. They're not going to demote him. They're not going to give him a pay cut because he's making the company money. So I really felt like, he was given the medium to be kind of like frivolous with how he could go ahead and make somebody feel bad or talk to somebody. It's like he was being given some wiggle room. As long as he didn't break any rules outright, everything else, just like what they say in life was kind of like a matter of perception. It's like, you felt like he was being disrespectful to you. I'm sorry. Okay, well, we'll let him know. But again, if you don't break any rule in the book, at least not outright, then it's becomes a matter of perception, or it's subjective, and then it's pretty much your word against his. What are you going to do?
So it sounds like this person got their position based on their prowess, as you called it, being a subject matter expert, but not based on their ability to lead people. Would that be a fair statement?
I think that's a very fair statement, because there's a lot of people that complained about him. He was a manager with the previous team in a different role, and a lot of people didn't like him. I think that he has, if I'm speaking objectively, without any kind of residual resentment I have towards him, because this is probably about 5 to 7 years ago. I think that there's definitely aspects of him which would speak to him having legitimate leadership qualities. However, I don't believe that he's, in the big picture, a really good leader. So somebody can have some good leadership qualities, a few of them, but overall still fail to be a great leader in the big picture, because they have enough deficiencies, perhaps, which counter their redeeming qualities or redeeming leadership qualities that they may have. So I would say that, yeah, this is somebody who is a subject matter expert, who definitely, with a few leadership qualities, who was given a managerial role or supervisory role, and he probably was not the best candidate for the job. Maybe he would have been good as a team leader or similar, but yeah, definitely not somebody who you want to give too much power, in my opinion.
So on the playground, this kind of peels back into the layer of the playground rules and antics phenomenon. I don't think anybody on the playground really likes the playground executive per se, because they're very oppressive. Yet nobody seems to want to buck the system. Saying that, what do you think it was about this manager or supervisor that kept him in office? Why were complaints against him not sustained? Why did the corporate leader or corporate owner not listen to all the complaints that were waged against him?
Well, perhaps they were listened to, but again, he's just too much of a knowledgeable guy for them to go ahead and replace him, or to get rid of him altogether. I think that they were trying to see that maybe they just needed to go ahead and move him between teams. Maybe there's a certain set of personalities that he needed to work with, or the smaller group. My understanding is that he worked with a bigger group of developers before he worked with my group, which was a group of analysts. We had 3 analysts that reported to him in our group, but I think there's at least 15, 20 developers that used to report to him. So I don't want to say that he was demoted, but he definitely was supervising a smaller group of people than he was before. And maybe they were just hoping that, who knows? Hey, this is such an intelligent guy. He's such a great asset to us. Maybe we just need to go ahead and find the right fit for him. Like you and I were talking about before, we've had some conversation about Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls. For those basketball fans out there, they're saying, well, Michael Jordan is definitely the guy who's a star, and he's definitely championship material. How do we go ahead and find the right supporting cast for him? This is the same kind of thing, even though those other players are not reporting to Jordan per se. In this case, you have a situation that's like, oh man, this guy's a superstar. He knows his stuff. We just got to go ahead and put him in the right situation for him to succeed, and then he'll be a champion. I think they were just giving him a heck of a lot of chances because he was just that knowledgeable.
Well, to add to that analogy, one of the things that made the Chicago Bulls so functional during their era, you made a good point about the star being Michael Jordan and Dennis Rodman and Scottie Pippen, and the support staff. The important and interesting dynamic that occurred there is the corporate leader, i.e. Phil Jackson, made sure that the stars respected their supporting staff, because you can't really have a functioning team if all members of the team don't work together. What would you have liked to see done differently? Because demoting them and putting him on another team just kind of displaces the issue, doesn't really fix anything.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that in a lot of those cases, you would have to go ahead. I guess the only way to answer that is that at the end of the day, somebody's got to go. So if something's not working, they're going to go ahead and blame somebody. Usually in professional sports, for example, it's going to be the coach who's going to go. But if you have that kind of personality in your in your locker room, who's not to go off on too much of a sports analogy here, but who's cancer, who's a cancerous kind of personality. At some point, the team may decide, hey, you know what, you're a great player, but you're a very poor presence in the locker room. You're not team oriented. People don't like you. That kind of thing. We just need to have a fresh start. But sometimes you'll have a rare talent, like I said. Not saying Michael Jordan is a bad guy, but you'll have such a rare talent. Like Michael Jordan's like, oh yeah, let's go ahead and we're going to get Michael Jordan next year's draft because this Michael Jordan is not working out. It's like a guy like Michael Jordan comes along not too often. So I think that in these situations, it's really, really hard to replace people that are extremely, extremely knowledgeable. And sometimes they figure that a change of scenery will do well for them. And in some cases, again, even when you give them that change of scenery, they still don't do well in those leadership roles because they go ahead, because the same antics and the same tendencies that they had before, the same negative qualities they bring with them wherever they go. So unless somebody at some point slaps them on the wrist, then they get demoted, they take pay cuts, they get a good talking to, whatever it is, they're going to go ahead and keep that up because that means the organization is enabling them. And we see the same kinds of things. If there's a significant amount of pushback in a personal relationship, sometimes people take advantage of each other. It's unfortunate, and then also same thing happens on the playground. So it's something to think about. But as we've been going through this conversation, because I've been thinking about this phenomenon for a while, we've discussed it, before. I actually had a really, really interesting example to bring up about something that happened in a different context. It literally just occurred to me. Light bulb went off maybe a minute ago. But please go ahead and elaborate if you had another question or if you wanted to elaborate on the last thing I just said. Maybe I'll have a chance to bring that up a little bit later.
Definitely, yes. We are very interested in hearing this because, this is obviously something that exists. One of the dangerous aspects of the playground rules and action phenomenon is not that it exists. It is that it is not very well known that it exists. And so when people bring it up, they're labeled as hypersensitive, like we said, or like, why can't you just ignore it or move on? But what we'd like to get into after your example is some actionable items, and maybe we can get to those items by reverse engineering. We all know that a bully is a bully because it's been working for them. And bully victims are bully victims because what they've been doing has not been working for them. And I'd be interested to hear your perspective after you give your example on what are some of the character traits of people that get picked on or get harassed or bullied, and how can we? What's the best place to look for those deficiencies, and what are some recommendations that you would have, and how we can get over those? But please go with your example.
Absolutely, and yeah, I'll make sure to get back to the answer to what you just asked me. Mainly the character traits of people who get bullied and that type of thing. Maybe certain vulnerabilities or whatever we can speak to, right? So this is actually in a fantastical world, but I can say this with a little bit of a comic relief. I think that a lot of us, I don't speak for everyone, but let's say that we like our phone apps. And sometimes we'll do puzzle games or strategy games on our phone or whatever. And I thought about something that I was reminded of about a year or two ago. I'm an extremely competitive person. And I was doing this app where I was building a kingdom. And I was part of a guild. And what ended up happening is that the guild has its own leadership. Now, we had one leader. There were several leaders, actually, but two came to mind. And these are great real-life examples. One leader was the subject matter expert, absolutely knew everything about the app that you could possibly figure out. I don't even know how they found this information because it wasn't online. Again, it involved building a kingdom, and it just seemed like they knew all the ins and outs of everything, but they'd be rude in the online chat. They'd almost like ridicule you for not seeming to know how much they knew, and sometimes I think that people felt like, well, I'd rather just not know the answer at all than ask them because I'm almost kind of like apprehensive about asking those questions. Whereas there's another leader who was really interesting. He was kind of tough and assertive, but at the same time I felt like he was always fair. And he didn't know nearly as much about the app as the first person did, or about building the kingdom and the ins and outs of it, all the intricacies. But he said, you know what? For anyone who wants to be in our alliance/guild, if you want to be in this group with us, you need to help each other out. Meaning, you go ahead. We're going to focus on one member here at a time, and we're going to donate all kinds of supplies. We're going to donate, like, there was gold, and there was wood, and there was food for the members of the kingdom, or the people who lived in the kingdom, the soldiers, the civilians, etc. Also stone, iron ore, that type of thing. It was really interesting. Really a metaphor to real life here. And he would go ahead and facilitate that everyone helped each other out and actually take account for the measurable progress that everyone had made. So I'd go ahead and I'd be donating all types of resources to help someone else build their kingdom who was part of my guild. And then after that, they'd be turning around, and once I had gotten to a certain level myself, or they had gotten to a certain level themselves, they went ahead and they helped me out. And that leader of this group, he facilitated that. And I thought, hey, you know what? This guy can be kind of tough sometimes, but like I said, he is fair, and people are making measurable progress as a result of what he is doing. People are benefiting. He's doing extremely well. Now, again, he doesn't know nearly as much about the app as other people. Like, you ask him questions, and sometimes it's just like, oh, man, I'd love to help you, but I really don't know. But he was actually a pleasure to work with, or to be a part of that guild with his leadership, whereas the other one, she knew a lot more than he knew about it, but she was just not nearly as approachable, extremely rude, and it kind of gives me, it kind of gives you two different types of leaders there. I don't want to say that she was a self-imposed executive, but she was definitely on the lines of what I experienced professionally. She was the subject matter expert, whereas he was the true leader. And I went ahead, and me with my big mouth, I went ahead and I called her out later, and I said, you're not a real leader. You may be the subject matter expert, but you're not a real leader because people don't feel good. People don't want to ask you questions. People are maybe improving their knowledge as a result of you, but their enjoyment of this guild, this alliance, and this app is less because of you. Whereas the other guy, he's a real leader. And that's why this alliance is going to fail, is because of people like you, because you're unfortunately online a lot more than he is. So that just made me think about that, how the subject matter experts, quote unquote, you can learn a heck of a lot from them, and they maybe make good team leads or maybe senior roles or whatever, but a lot of times they don't exhibit really good leadership skills, whereas this other guy, like I said, he made sure everybody was helping everyone else out, and that people are making measurable progress. And I was just thinking about how I felt like I was not quite being bullied by her, but I didn't like her. I didn't have a good vibe about her. I didn't enjoy reporting to her within that alliance or guild. Whereas the other guy, even though he was a little tough sometimes, I definitely enjoyed having him as leader. And I'm like, that's true leadership right there. That's my kind of guy.
Yeah, definitely. And so people don't say, well, that's just a game. It doesn't apply to real life. That is exactly how Phil Jackson ran his team. He basically said, we have stars, we have supporting cast, but my role is to make sure that we all work together. And in fact, Phil Jackson was not the subject matter expert as far as the tactics of the game. He had people like Tex Winter that were there to help them have the killer offense they had with the triangle offense. And so that may beg the question, should corporations have a different philosophy and mindset when they seek to appoint their leadership? Because it's almost like just because you're a senior matter expert, a subject matter expert, does not mean that you are able to bring teams together to perform the task at hand. That's really what you need when you're going to appoint your leaders. That may be one of our actionable items we're looking for as far as what advice corporations can take, even though they're not asking, as far as how they can go ahead and put a winning team together and making sure that people that are leaders are actually people driven towards bringing people together towards accomplishing a mission.
Absolutely. I love how you said that. I couldn't have said it better myself. And I think that the subject matter expert in my ideal would be the person who would be like a senior member of the team who didn't necessarily have a leadership role, but maybe you go ahead and you reward the subject matter expert. I mean, subject matter experts deserve to be rewarded, but you compensate them maybe more, I don't know, with a handsome salary or whatever, because it's like, hey, if they know their stuff better, then they deserve to be rewarded accordingly. But they don't necessarily deserve to be in leadership roles. And I think that a lot of times the subject matter experts being in leadership roles actually, and like I said, I thought about a professional example of that and an aspect of that, which is kind of like an adult playground, if you will, or in a playground in the adult world where I was doing an online app. And I'm just like, yeah, in both cases, the subject matter experts just did not have the leadership qualities that helped the morale of the team. I think that one of the things we've been talking about in this playground antics, rules and antics phenomenon, is that morale is extremely important. And that morale is achieved largely through having very good leadership that makes people feel, hey, there's upward mobility within our organization, or there's upward mobility in our team. There's a chance to move up. There's a chance to make more money on a number of things. Now, again, that's that might seem like an obvious thing to say, but at the same time, it's like it needs to be consistent. So you can never have seemingly 100% even playing field, but at the same time, I really do believe that you can achieve a higher level of morale in your organization if people feel like somebody is not playing favorites, or there isn't a great deal of nepotism involved, or any number of things. Now, again, that's the pursuit of an ideal. Whether or not the ideal is achievable, I don't know. But at the same time, it's just like it's it's very important, and this is important for all the relationships that we have in the world with each other, even people across the world. Do not treat people with biases, whether those biases are positive or negative. Try to do your best to avoid that. Try to give everyone as fair of a chance as possible. It's never going to be 100% even playing field, but at the same time, try to reward people based on merit rather than who they are or what they represent. Just reward them based on their actual merits, and reward them perhaps even more for treating others well while doing it. So if you find that subject matter expert who knocks it out of the park in terms of their knowledge, but then on top of that puts in extra hard work, maybe after hours, or and is known for how incredibly approachable they are and how much they're seek to educate others and help them out. Reward them even more for that. And I'm not even saying just monetarily, in other ways too. You know what I'm saying?
It seems like one of the attributes of the playground executive who then transcends into the corporate scenario is that this character type is going to try and lead by asserting themselves over others, versus a servant-style leadership of putting themselves in the shoes of those they lead in the efforts to making their job lives easier and more effective. So I guess the takeaway for the listeners and even for us is that, if you own a corporation, make sure that you are picking people to lead your teams that actually care about the success of people they lead. Because at the end of the day, without the people they lead, they'll be by themselves in the battlefield. So, towards the previous question, what advice can we muster up as far as those people that feel like they're being bullied or feel like they're being harassed or feel like they're getting short end of the stick? Maybe we can reverse engineer and go back to the playground where it all starts. What have you noticed? You said you were bullied yourself, about people that are bullied. What is some of the things that you think make them an easy target, or make them appealing, or make them somebody that people may think that they can do what they want to them?
And I love that question. I think it's really important to answer that, and this is something that you and I have spoken about offline as well. I think that people who are really good at being bullies seem to have a knack to detect other people's self-doubt or self-esteem issues, vulnerabilities, hesitation, So, for example, in this podcast, I've been friends for a long time, but in this podcast, I go ahead and hesitate because you're asking me a question, and I collect my thoughts. It's like, okay, what do I want to say? So I'm kind of like organizing myself, but it's not as a hesitation that has to do with self-esteem or anything. It's actually because I'm processing your question and reflecting how to respond to it. Sometimes, though, hesitation can be seen by an adversary, I believe, as a point of weakness. It's like, oh man, you don't really know where you stand on this, do you? Or I can go ahead and say something and you're not going to be sure about your response. Or I can go ahead and push you on the playground, give you a nice shove, but you're not sure if you're going to be fighting back because you're going to be probably too busy weighing the advantages and disadvantages whether you should or not. I think people sense that. I think that especially bullies sense that. They sense hesitation in us. They sense when people have low self-esteem. They observe them. I think that they're probably able to pick up on someone who's second-guessing themselves quite a bit. And second-guessing, let me say, is not necessarily something that's effective, but it's a very human thing to do. It's okay to second-guess ourselves. We're people. We're vulnerable at times. We are not sure if we're making the right decision, and that's okay because most of us, I'd like to think, have a moral compass. We're trying to make sure that we're making the right choices for ourselves, for our loved ones, etc. But the thing is
a moral compass is never a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. But as you're speaking, I'm thinking of one of the hardest transitions for people that get bullied is that people that were blessed to have two parents in their life, or one very good parent in their life that has given them and instilled upon them a moral compass, manners, how to be polite, let people in line first, the reason why they hesitate is because they're taken by surprise on the playground when they're faced with a scenario that has no rules. And all the stuff we talked about are basically the rules of society, of being polite, of having etiquette, of having manners. And so it can be very disgruntling or very confusing for people that are used to a household environment where you have rules and respect, and be inserted into a scenario like a playground, or fast forwarding to a corporate scenario that operates like a playground, and not knowing how to function. Not understanding how somebody who is good at what they do but is not very good at handling people, how are they in charge? And then how do they stay in charge once the uppers realize that they're not good at handling people? It's like, how do you operate in a land with no rules, which in essence the playground is.
Absolutely, and that was very, very well stated. One of the things that the message I want people to know who are out there who have been bullied in a professional situation, in a personal relationship, or on the playgrounds, in the real life, not a metaphoric playground, or at school or whatever, you're not alone. There's many of us out there that are feeling that and searching for answers, and that's what this show is really about. Is we're looking for answers as far as that. And I really like what you said of how do you go ahead and function in that environment with no rules. Like, one of the things that happened, I remember when I was in school, and I'm not hesitant to admit, I got into a few fights at school, more than my share actually. I didn't start them, maybe one of them, but that was more just like I think I just made a bad choice. I didn't really mean to start a fight, but I think that I was teasing somebody to try to be kind of fun about it, and then that person got mad, and it kind of went too far. So, I don't consider myself a bully in general, but I may have made a mistaken judgment there. I'm not afraid to admit that. However, in other situations, one of the things that I did was, if I felt like I was being bullied and I went to go ahead and I went to fight back, or I felt like I was about to get into a fight, is that sometimes I got approached by more than one person at a time, or a group of people. And one of the things that I do, the first things that I do, I'd be checking to see if there's teachers around. Is there anybody around, any teachers, whatever? Not because I was planning on, telling on somebody or reporting them or whatever, is because I actually wanted to engage in the fight. I just wanted to make sure that if I fought one of the guys, that the other two or three guys weren't going to jump me as well. Because, again, to your point, an environment that has no rules, or nobody administering those rules, all three or four of those guys could jump me at once, and there would be not a thing that I could do about it. But any one of those guys individually, bring it on, was kind of my mentality. And, and that's the kind of chip that I guess I had on my shoulder, where I felt like as long as there's some kind of restraint where they'd say, hey, we're fighting to make a point here, we're standing our ground, I have a right to defend myself, but there's got to be somebody around to break it up, like some kind of referee or some kind of administrator or somebody out there on the playground to go ahead and stop this from boiling over into territories where either A, somebody gets seriously hurt, or B, like I mentioned, somebody gets jumped by 3 or 4 people, which is not a fair fight. So I definitely wasn't afraid to fight, but I wanted a fair fight, and then I wanted a clean one. And I wanted that fight to have a beginning and have an end. Kind of like, they have in professional fighting these days. At the end of 12 rounds, or after there's a TKO, or people are broken up by the referee, I have no problem, but I don't want it. I don't want things to get completely out of hand where somebody gets, really, really hurt, or there's no boundaries as to how many people can jump you at once. Even the playground should have rules, or even school fights should have rules or implied rules. Even war is known to have rules. There's actual international laws which are govern warfare and treatment of POWs and that kind of thing, prisoners of war. And the playground should have rules. And the question is, do these playgrounds actually have rules? And A, and B, if they do have rules, which in a lot of cases they don't seem to, is there anybody around to actually enforce those rules?
Yeah, well, as far as the rules, I don't know about you, but I never received a playground rule manual. Just a curious question. When you were looking around authorities in the playground, how often did you see them?
I did see that's a great question. I do remember seeing them in a lot of cases. Sometimes I didn't, but even when I did see them, it seemed like they were not engaged. They weren't looking in this direction. Maybe they were distracted. Maybe they were going ahead, and it was the teachers that were talking to some other teachers, and they had their back to me. So if somebody went ahead and pushed me, that teacher wouldn't even see it. It's kind of like they were there.
That brings another. Sorry to cut you off. That brings another observation that corporations would be wise to follow. When you appoint leadership, it's not a matter of appointing them and cutting them loose. It's a constant evaluative process, a constant mentorship. You have to make sure that your leaders are staying cogent with the philosophy of your corporation. And, my son is bullied a lot in school. It's getting better. But one of the very disheartening facts about this, and I kind of thought of that as you were speaking, every time he looks around, there's either no adult present or an adult not really present in the corner somewhere on their cell phone. And like you said, not engaged.
Exactly.
That's a big issue, especially in scenarios where there are no rules present.
And that's the thing, and we could change the words, and I'm glad that we relate to each other on that level. I mean, I wish it were different for both of us, because I think that both of us, and both your son and me, deserve better. Where nobody deserves to get treated like that. And here we have a situation where it's like, it's kind of like the adage of the tree that falls in the forest. It's like in this case, it's like, even if there are rules, if there's nobody around to enforce them, or if they're not being, or if they're not engaged or not present because they're doing something else, then what's the point of the rules to begin with? Now, the playground is supposed to have rules, technically. If we're going with real life metaphor here, my understanding would be, hey, even though you wouldn't necessarily see a playground manual from them, they would say, oh, here's how many minutes you have for your recess, and make sure to be safe near equipments like the swings or the slide or whatever. So technically, there would be some rules for the playground, but in those situations that you discussed, where somebody's being threatened or harassed or whatever, you got a lot of gray areas to the point that there may as well not be many rules, if any at all, because people are able to get away with all kinds of things in those environments. And I know that from my own experience, because I literally had 3 or 4 people ganging up on me at once in plain view of others, and nothing was done about it whatsoever, like physically ganging up on me. So, even if there are rules, like I said, loosely enforced, or somebody's not engaged enough to enforce them, then there may as well not be rules at all. And I like that, leading into my next point, that you have a playground manual for life that you've been writing, and I've had a chance to read some of the points from that one. That's really interesting, because this is just kind of like a rules of the road of life, where includes a lot of your observations that you made through the years, through your own personal and professional experiences. So I'd love to hear you share some of that with us, either wrapping up today's broadcast or leading into our next one.
Definitely, I appreciate that. Yeah, we'll probably cover more of that in future episodes, but I guess, while well-intentioned and hopefully well-written, if we don't have authorities enforcing these rules, like you said, we may as well not have any rules.
Exactly.
To close this episode off, I want to hear from you as far as what are some of the options. We've given actionable items to the corporations as far as, making them be aware of their selection process of the leaders, and making sure that the people that they pick care about people and care about making life easier for their subordinates, and to have a mentorship program In other words, you don't just make a leader and then cut them loose. What are some actionable items for those that may be on the other side of the bully spectrum, i.e. those getting bullied? Of course, they can just leave. But as we know, the way the universe works, you pretty much are going to keep encountering the same thing until you learn how to deal with it. So a two-pronged question, what are some of the attributes aside from hesitance that you think, going back to the playground, you would have done differently that would have made you less of a prime target? And what are some of the options people have in a professional world to try and subvert those odds and maybe make life better for themselves?
Absolutely. And I think that those are two very important questions to that you asked, and to answer them for people. We can answer them, to the best of our abilities in this podcast, or the next time, or people can answer it for themselves, and we'd love to hear people's input as well. But a couple of messages in closing that I wanted to go ahead and to give to people, myself from my own experiences. Again, I said before, I'll say it again. If you've ever felt bullied, threatened, harassed, that type of thing, remember, you are not alone. There's people that you can reach out to. There's services that help with those types of things. Sometimes it's a little more implicit. Sometimes it's more subtle. And one of the things that we had talked about is it's important for people who are in managerial or roles or executive branches of companies to hear this podcast as well, to understand, hey, this is how people feel, and this is why people's morale is low. Sometimes this may be why you're not getting as much productivity out of them, that kind of thing, because they feel like it's not an even playing field, or they feel like they're being bullied either explicitly or implicitly. So I'm hoping that one of the solutions that we're heading towards, even though it's not going to happen overnight, is that if enough people with power, business owners, and people in executive positions with companies officially titled as such, they'll stop and they'll think, hey, is there a lot of people in our employee force? Are they feeling this way? Are they feeling like, hey, it's not fair here, we're being mistreated here, we're being disrespected here? So, again, some food for thoughts, and this affects everyone, from the most powerful top-end person in terms of stature in the organization, all the way down the organizational chart to whoever's working in what role. And all due respect to everyone, including them and everyone in between. Everything what we do in our roles in our daily lives, and personal or professional level, no matter what we do, matters. We deserve to be treated with respect. And like I said, this is something for somebody to hear. Not only the people who've experienced the bullying, but to know that they're not alone, but also for the people who had administered an unfair environment or bullied others to think twice about doing so in the future, because ultimately it hurts them too. And maybe today it's them going ahead and making somebody feel bad or talking down to somebody, disrespecting them, but it may be happening to a friend of theirs or a loved one in the future who's being disrespected or threatened or any number of things. So at the end of the day, the playground antics and the bullying and self-imposed leadership and those forms of disrespect are toxic to everyone, either directly or indirectly, when it's all said and done. I think that's a very important message to convey. So how do we go ahead and maneuver away from that and find better ways to do these things, find better ways to treat each other?
Definitely. So in closing, any listener out there that would like to send any scenarios in which you've been a victim of corporate bullying that you'd like us to take a look at, and leaving names out, maybe address situations and our take on it, reflections on it, and maybe advice on it. Something very important that we hope corporations understand is the tremendous liability, social liability you have to making a workplace conducive to productivity. One of the main things to understand is that everybody you employ is only going to be as productive as you allow them to be. By that I mean, I'm not saying that the total onus and responsibility is on the corporation as far as how hard you work, your work ethic, but making an even playing field, being aware of the playground antics and how they affect society and how they have never been really debunked, and they carry on definitely alive and well into many corporations. Because really the only thing that changes in people's lives is their age. So if you're a bully on the playground, you're going to be a bully in a corporation until someone stops that. So in closing, I'd like to read the last two sentences of the manual that Mark spoke about. And that will be our closing for today's episode. This is titled The Epitome of the Playground Rules and Antics Phenomenon. The only professional disillusionment that is bigger than failing to reach your potential because you were outworked is when your effort is overlooked because you don't know the right people. Again, corporations, please don't make the rules of your corporation be a popularity contest. Don't make it be about who has the most friends in high places. Make it be a legitimate playing field in which work ethic and people's desire to bring value to a corporation leads the day.